So the second session was one of those things where I had a lot planned, and not a lot of it actually went. Not a lot of things actually happened. And I mean, we were missing, I think, Carl, so we didn't have Nero like actively there. We didn't have Dor, so we didn't have Bureg there either. Um, so it was a lot of things where we didn't actually have everybody there, but we still ran the session, and I mean, not a lot of things happened, but we still had some stuff happen. Uh, Essentially, the first part of the dungeon, they managed to fiddle their way through and find a and Rinny was doing this thing where she's now using the aromancy to sort of feel around the rooms and like sense vibrations and like find passageways and things like that, which is useful way to use air magic. Just use it to sort of get a feel for a room, sort of thing. So she does that, and they basically use that to find their way through the darkness and make their way into a cell area. Inside the cell, they locate two talking mice who say that they belong to the magical teens who are in the village. Like they're like Deus, except they weren't taken away from the village, and they were young by like they were just being like born by the time that Deus was taken away. So he doesn't know them, and they obviously weren't very good candidates to become magical students because they were you know around newborns, so they weren't really very useful as students, sort of thing. So essentially, they said, "Oh, we belong to them," and so basically, what the party decided was, "Okay, well, we'll take you back once we're done here, but you can come with us." And so these talking rats are like, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure, we can come with you," and they sort of were sort of fun for me to play around with, but they don't really have a huge role right now. But I might have them have more dialogue later on because it's fun to. And he's sort of keeping them in his pockets, like all Dragon Quest style. So I'm just laughing a little bit, just like, oh yeah, you have these talking rats that are hanging out of your pockets. Like it might be kind of fun to have them say more things later on. After that, they made their way into the next room, which was actually the main problem with that room was that there was a very powerful sort of door that was made of cold iron, so it repelled Rinny's character right away because she was a fae. So she couldn't even touch the door without taking or get near it without taking damage. So she had to hand her lockpicks over to Deus, who used a combination of his magic and raw skill to sort of disable the magical lock that was on the door. Because not only is the door made of cold iron to repel spiritual and magical beings, but it also had a magic lock on it. So whatever was behind there was a pretty big deal. Um, Deus ended up walking to the next room mostly by himself, and found that there were the room was full of chains that moved on their own. So he used his magical sight to find out that they were basically ghosts that had been held here by the priest, in a term of they're sentenced to afterlife in prison, which I thought was clever. So not only are they being held forever, but they're being held there even after they're dead. So their spirits are being held in prison, and they're being held by magical chains and all that. And they can't find the key to unlock the chains, and Deus can't really doesn't have enough skill to really identify how the chains work because they're very advanced at magic. So he's like, okay, well, I need to find the key for that, but I'm going to just move on for right now. So they mostly moved on. The next thing that happened was they went down the stairway, and they again, using another intrusion, they got attacked by a group of slimes, which weren't very challenging, except for the fact that they were resistant to Nero's ice breath. But beyond that, they weren't really that challenging, but they weren't really meant to be very challenging. We had a lot of the characters sort of kick them around and hit them into walls because then they started like to slide down the walls like goop. It was really fun to sort of describe all that. But for the most part, the main thing that was cool was that since they were summoned creatures, because they were summoned by the priest, and Aedeus identified this by seeing like these summoning glyphs on the walls. He was like, "Oh, they're summoned, so we need to either mess with the glyphs or find a way to unsummon them." Eudeus like, "Well, if they were summoned by holy magic, I can just banish them using the same method." So he does, and he banishes them, relatively easily without much effort, and that's how they were defeated. Uh, I mean, they had weakened them already to like halfway being dead, but then Yadea is just like, you know what, I'll just, banish them out of the way. And then they got banished. Bye. You know. So it was a relatively quick battle, but a fun one nonetheless. And it was interesting to sort of subvert their expectations. Like, I had put that they were immune to cold and fire, and Deus is immediately like, wait, maybe the ice breath can freeze them. We should hit them with the ice, and it immediately does absolutely nothing. So he wastes his use, and they're like, oh, that didn't work like we thought. Oh, well, I guess we'll have to try something else. That was sort of interesting because I knew going in that wouldn't work, and yet I allowed that. I said, yeah, you could try that if you want, and they were immune. So it was fairly interesting to do stuff like that. But otherwise, it was a fairly uneventful session. A lot of the stuff that I had planned didn't actually happen, but it might happen on the way back out of the dungeon. Oh, that's right, I forgot to mention the whole encounter with the guards. And that was the best part of the session, and it actually is what earned Deus the MVP. He essentially, what they had done was that the guards had, because they had been casting all these spells and talking for a while, so the guards had actually realized that the guards had actually realized that they had escaped, or essentially that these people had stolen the key and gone down to the dungeon. So Yadea comes up and tries to talk to them, and he rolls like a natural one on his, socializing. So essentially, the guards get fed up with him. The one guard, who is an elf, he gets very angry and sort of kicks him down the stairs. Yadea took a lot of damage from that, and essentially he hit his head, and his head started bleeding. And then they started like making their way through the dungeon. They're like, you know what? You say there are rats and monsters down here. We'll take care of them. Get out of our way. And he's like, well, you don't. The guards are saying, well, you don't have authority here. We do. You might be a priest, but this is our church. So they literally kick him out of the way. After he's been trying to hold them back, like, no, you can't go here, and he's been like literally like holding them back, like with his hands, and the main guard, the captain, who's like this elf with pyromancy abilities because he shows that he can like conjure flame with his hands. He sort of gets very angry and sort of kicks him down the stairs, and then causes Yadea to take massive damage and bleed. And then he starts, going down the stairs, and Yadea starts spouting all this stuff like, "Oh no, They starts like trying to stop him, and then the elf just like kicks him and does even more damage to the point where he gets, like, in system terms, he actually gets wounded. So now he's like on the ground, wounded and bleeding, while he's trying to hide the fact the other party members are still there. So the other party members, like, they run into the jail cell and like lock it behind them to buy themselves some time. And then what Deus decides to do is he's like, I know, we'll put on a horror show. So essentially, they say to like Bureg, like, okay, can you make some kind of like fog or whatever? And I'm like, yeah, he could do something like that, easily, because that's like very simple magic. And then, oh, I'm gonna transform myself using my biokinetic and necromancy to like make myself look sort of skeletal and like evil. I'm like, okay, you could do that. You could put on some sort of like illusion and like make yourself appear like really scary. And so essentially what he does is he opens this door while the guards are like looking around, and then he starts coming out of the room, and he's like, leave this place, while he's like looking like really scary and like evil. And Yudea was like trying to warn them. He's like, no, there are evil monsters down here. You don't want to go. And then they're like, no, we can handle it. And then Deus just comes out. He's like, and he's like trying to scare them, and it works. And they start running away. And the one guy who's like the captain of the guard, this elf who was pyromancy, divine fire magic. He's like, no, you will back away. And he shoots basically like this burst of flame at Deus, and Deus, to defend, he gets a natural 20. So what I say is essentially like, innately, Deus, without even thinking, automatically sort of, with his magic, he just like instinctively dispels it. Just like instinctively just like causes it to deflect off of his hand, and this flame like hits the walls. And the the elf is like, oh god, he deflected my divine flame. Oh no! Like now he's freaking out. He starts backing up. They basically send the guards like fleeing back up the tunnel, and that was amazing. So I had given him like the MVP award for that night because that was a really awesome move, and it was all basically just like, yeah, that could have killed him. And yet he just like deflects it like it's nothing, and it freaks the guards out so much that they just run away in panic. That was a really good scene. Otherwise, yeah, not a lot happened, but this is only the first half of the dungeon, because after they sort of make their way through the room with the ghosts and the slimes on because the slimes were on the stairway. So after they head down the stairway, they see that there's a glass sort of a door, like a reflective door, almost like if you have the sliding doors in your house, like on the patio or something like that. Sort of like that. So they sort of open that, and they find themselves in a greenhouse that is known as the private garden of Father Amar. So next session, they're going to find out what's going on in the garden, and hopefully actually find Father Amar as they continue to venture through the church catacombs. I've been having a lot of fun with this session, and I was really happy that I was able to plan a dungeon, which I can actually show. This is my map for the. I think it's upside down. Yeah, it is. Okay. So I was really happy that I was able to plan this for the dungeon. I made this entire map sort of like by hand, and it was really interesting to sort of work out where everything was. I'll show it both ways just in case I'm flipping it the wrong way. Yeah, this one definitely looks like it's upside down. I also drew the small village that they were in, which is the village of Brightmoor. I just wanted to show these off because really cool stuff. I have a lot of fun drawing these maps, and last time I drew a dungeon map for my sci-fi game, I didn't even get to use it. So this time I actually get to use my map, and it'll be interesting to see where they are. It's a fairly straightforward dungeon, but it's also something where I put a lot of effort into sort of figuring out, where everything was, and putting detail into each room and environment. So for me, giving each room a sort of important feel was really a good thing, and I'm excited to see where they go after this, and figure out how they're going to approach the sort of trials coming up, because the next few things they have to deal with are sort of very tricky and not very straightforward, and are actually somewhat difficult. I made this dungeon fairly hard, to the point where they needed to work together to overcome a lot of the obstacles. And because I designed it, for 4 or 5 people to go through a dungeon, it shouldn't be easy, and it should require a lot of teamwork. And so that's what I'm kind of testing them on at the moment. And so far, they've done a fairly good job. But we'll see how that goes next time when I run it. It's currently scheduled for Tuesday, I think. So I'll see. I'm still rescheduling it to see if everyone's okay with that schedule. But for right now, I'm running it on Tuesdays, and it's going fairly good so far. A lot of the stuff that I added to the game seems to be working out for the best, and I'm really happy that I'm able to play a game weekly for once, and I'm devoting a lot of my time and attention to it. It's really good because usually I'm divided up between so many games that I never have time to really focus on one. And we're getting a lot of good moments out of all the characters as we go, and that's sort of what I like. So I'll see you guys next time when I do the next recap.